Welcome to Offshoot, the Fident Capital podcast with host Kevin Choquette. Offshoot is a curiosity-driven conversation that features a wide range of real estate and business professionals. In each episode, we unpack the knowledge, vantage point, and domain expertise of our guests. Then, we move beyond the facts and figures and dive into the personal habits and mindset which allow them to be high performers in their respective field. This podcast's objective is simple: supporting entrepreneurs, fostering relationships, and uncovering meaningful conversations that positively impact business.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 30 of Offshoot. My guest today is Damien Farrell, founder of West Modular, a construction company that manufactures modular apartment buildings from a 210,000 square foot facility in Tijuana, Mexico. At maximum output, West Modular can produce 1,500 to 2,000 apartments annually and build them in half the time of conventional construction. Demien brings over $500 million in completed developments to the conversation, including 3 major hotels: Dream Hollywood, Thompson Hollywood, and Tommie Hollywood, plus a hospitality portfolio that grew to 20 venues across 3 states before being acquired by Las Vegas-based Hakkasan Group. His experience and frustration with cost overruns, delays, and change orders on those projects, combined with his experience in entitling and permitting over $1 billion in projects, drove him to discover and commit to what he calls the future of construction. What makes this conversation really compelling is Damien's deep understanding of both the technical and financial challenges plaguing development today. While you can argue that this is a better mousetrap, the product itself addresses a myriad of external challenges outside of the module construction that make housing unaffordable and projects difficult to fund. Listen in as we cover topics that include how BIM software and cloud-based collaboration are revolutionizing construction by getting consultants to work together in real time, eliminating costly coordination issues that plague conventional builds, how steel-based modular can reach 12 stories versus wood's 5-story limitation, which makes it ideal for the increased density created by California's upzoning initiatives, how West Modular's 29 workstation assembly line breaks building downs into individual part numbers, just like automotive manufacturing does, how full-time factory-based quality assurance and quality control management provides quality superior to site-built construction, why conventional construction's change orders, delays, labor shortages, and development timelines cascade to increase costs and projects risk, while modular's compressed timeline reduces interest carry and some significant building risks. The importance of maintaining your team and network relationships through both successes and failures in entrepreneurship, why attention to detail, follow-up systems, and disciplined time management separate successful young entrepreneurs from those who may confuse activity with achievement, and how adversity and getting knocked down create the resilience necessary for long-term success. This episode is a bit of a masterclass on how technology, manufacturing principles, and strategic execution can and will revolutionize our industry and its outdated practices. I hope you enjoy the podcast. Damien, good morning. Thanks for taking the time to join me on the podcast this morning. I appreciate it.
Yeah, great to be here. Excited to talk about all things kind of prefabricated modular construction.
Perfect. Look, I know you've got a lot of experience in this. Just to get the audience acquainted with you and the company, why don't you just give a bit of a background on West Modular and what it is you guys do?
Yeah, so how I got into this space was I had a lot of frustrations with building high-rise buildings in Los Angeles related to cost overruns, delays, change orders, all the above that, anyone in development has experienced. And I just set out to figure out a better way to do it. And I don't want to say that I'm the first, because volumetric modular construction has been around since the 50s. But really, I recognized it, especially in today's markets with the labor shortages of skilled labor, as well as just general construction costs. We have to do things more efficiently and faster. And that's really what we do. We just build apartments and now now single family in a manufacturing environment. So we don't treat it like a conventional construction TI. We literally treat it like manufacturing cars, where we break down every part number and um, put the parts together to make apartment buildings and or now single family homes.
And you're doing it down in Mexico, right?
Yeah. So when I studied this business originally, uh, internationally and specifically up in the Netherlands, in Asia, there was a lot of companies and countries, frankly, doing this already. And I said, why isn't this happening in the US? And I was traveling to Poland, Latvia, China, and I'm like, well, I'm going to buy these modules here. I got to ship them halfway around the world. I have ports to deal with, logistics to deal with. The main common denominator that I recognized was less expensive labor. And I said, well, being a San Diego guy for the last 20 years, we've got Tijuana just right across the border here. So as I studied it more, I started recognizing that a lot of the Fortune 500 companies that we all know, Toyota, Samsung, Hyundai, Foxconn, all have a presence right there in Tijuana as well, and they produce a lot of different products in that area. And once we uncovered that, I said, this is a no-brainer to just set up our own factory right here, essentially in Southern California.
I mean, presumably with the sort of Fortune 500s that you just listed, there is actually a skilled labor base down in Tijuana.
Yeah, that's what we recognize. I mean, we've in the US kind of abandoned manufacturing, and the current administration, I think, is obviously, if you watch the news, is pushing to bring a lot of that manufacturing back to the US. We do operate under the United States, Mexico, Canada agreements. So I think when we look at nearshoring, which has been a huge movement since the pandemic, it's again, we're a lot stronger with our local trade partners than trying to logistically bring, especially the size of what we do. They're essentially life-size Legos. So to try to bring that product halfway around the world can be challenging, and also have dimension constraints where we're able to just truck from 14 miles south of the border. It makes things a lot easier to execute, and also gives us more flexibility in our dimensions and sizes of our modules.
Yep. And I know you guys are building with steel, which I think is a pretty unique differentiator. When in the past I've looked out into the kind of modular world, which I know is a term you guys are leaning away from, but why are you guys building in steel, and how does that differentiate you from like other modular construction vendors or
Yeah,
people in the marketplace?
most U.S. modular companies are kind of started around the mobile home park or the double loaded, double wide trailer.
Mm-hmm.
And what I recognized studying modular specifically in Asia and the Baltic states was that we were setting out to scale affordable workforce housing. And that product wants to be in denser urban infill areas where the jobs are, where the, amenities, supermarkets and transit, mass transit are. And with the upzoning that's occurred in California recently in the last 10 years, with a lot of the state bills, height restrictions and density has been, increased dramatically. And when you look at that, wood caps out at 5 stories. right? And you can do a type 3 building, which is 3 levels of concrete and 5 levels of wood. Those buildings are very costly due to material costs of concrete these days and qualified subcontractors to, put up those 3 concrete levels. And then you have to come and frame 5 levels of wood, where our system can go up to 12 stories with concrete reinforcement, where wood just can't do that, right? So when you look at whether it's affordable housing obligations as part of some of these developments to increase that density, where developers get that bonus, the bonus amount of units in a building because there's some of them are affordable. Oftentimes that building has to push up in height, and that's where we come in with the steel module.
It's just a better product fit for the marketplace, right? I mean,
yeah, well, again, wood just caps out essentially at 5 levels, and we can go up to 12 with our system.
Yeah. So I was just thinking, as you're talking about the Baltics, you're talking about that they have, pretty vibrant systems over there for this kind of manufacturing. How would you guys be able to, now I'm just being curious. It seemed like the cost structure over there might be significantly higher. Are they actually able to deliver a product that's ready for the international market at a price point that works? Because it seems like an expensive economy.
Yeah, and I think when you look at geopolitical risks as well as just what happened during COVID with the complete shutdown of transatlantic or international cargo
Trade.
ships.
Yeah.
It's just you're so then subject to any of those variables that could literally take down your project. And what's really great about where we are, we get the benefits of the less expensive labor, so we're able to make affordable housing and workforce housing deals underwrite much better for the developer, because a lot of this stuff with current interest rates, you just can't get it financed. And then when you can't get it financed, those units aren't, those housing units aren't coming on the market. So, this is a hack to do it. We do it in half the time of a conventional build. So when you look at the interest carry, I know you guys are kind of finance focused company. When you look at the interest carry, we have a much more compressed duration of money out there, and it's frankly less risk in a lot of cases for the lender as well. So it's a much more constant product, a much more constant schedule, coupled with less exposure to change orders and the likes of construction defects, because again, we do it in a controlled environment. We create, and we can probably sidebar into this conversation, but the Autodesk BIM software has allowed modular construction to flourish, because just like you look at a video game these days, and I'm in my 50s, so I remember playing Atari and Nintendo, but now these games are virtual reality, right? And
Yep.
when we look at that just as a comparison, that's what we do. We create a virtual twin of the building that literally has every screw. And now that software, if you set up the building correctly in the software, we have an exact quantity of every piece of material that goes in that building. So procurement becomes better and more efficient, less waste, more efficiencies, again, resulting in cost savings to the developer. I mean, if you've seen a conventional construction job site, how many dumpsters get pulled away from that site over the course of the project?
Oh, yeah. Or just the half-utilized box or bin or pallet of whatever quantity or whatever SKU that needs to go in there. There's a lot of waste, undoubtedly.
Yeah, and when I was building the hotels in Hollywood, I built 3 high-rise hotels, and exactly at the end of the project, the fire marshal saying, "Hey, you got to clear out the parking garages." One building had 4 levels of underground parking, the other one had 3, and literally the lower 2 levels of the parking garage was completely full with material that frankly we had to basically put on eBay or just send to the dump. And,
Wow.
we're eliminating all that. And when we even do our virtual twin of the building, we actually cut the material virtually so that we have the least amount of waste.
Oh,
So there's
wow.
multiple layers to studying reduction of material going in the dumpster or to the dump. Yeah.
Yeah, let's drill in there because I think this, from my outside view, this aspect of what you guys do is really vital. It's a huge part of the value prop. The BIM software is, like, I'm not in your industry, but I've seen kids play Minecraft, and that's where I can kind of go like, oh yeah, it's like 3D Legos, and you can fly all around. And we have one builder, developer, architect client, and he will fly us through his buildings, like literally just like go through walls, and you can see the HVAC, and you can see the
That's exactly what we do. Yep.
MEP systems. But it seems you guys have also got another piece, which is that, and maybe that's like the Revit piece that you detail on your website, which, well, why don't you tell me about some of the data that's attached to the building model? Because it seems like you guys have a pretty
Yeah.
cool tech stack that makes all this happen.
And yeah, that's really what allows everything to flourish. And it's funny. I look back, and when I was building these hotels, I often compare, because that was really what pushed me. The cost overruns on those pushed me into this space. But we did do BIM, okay, but we only did it to level 200, which is like routing your major air conditioning ducts, call it, and or like big clunky stuff that needed to be kind of figured out how to get it structurally through the building without compromising the
Structure.
integrity,
Yeah.
the structural integrity and or the seismic calculation, right? Oh, we have a concrete wall here, but we've got a 3x3 or 4x3 air conditioning duct that needs to pass through that wall. Well, obviously the wall becomes weaker when you put that big hole in it, right? So
Mhm.
we did it to that aspect. However, when you got up to the 9th floor of the hotel and you had all these, different fire sprinkler systems and lighting and soffits and exhaust from the kitchen on the ground floor coming up through the building. Well, the ceiling heights got pushed down so much that we couldn't fireproof certain elements that are required for commercial construction. So the building inspector's sitting there going, hey guys, this isn't fire rated anymore. You don't have the wrap, or you don't have the layers of drywall you need to protect this. And we're saying, well, if we put that on, we don't have the head clearance for code. And he's saying, well, you got to figure it out. So these are the types of items, right, where to come back to it, that's level 200, where you're only putting in like your major infrastructure systems, but you're not detailing that BIM model down to the screws. Then after you say go to LOD, level of detail 400 in the BIM model, where you're putting in every screw pattern and every last bit of literally the vinyl cove base on the back of house room, and then you have to go in and actually tag all those elements with the exact specification of material it is. So again, it's the garbage in, garbage out scenario of software, where you can have the best software in the world, but if the data that is put into that software isn't true and correct and set up the correct way, you're never going to be able to pull the correct information out. So the idea is that we have multiple layers of detailing in that BIM model, and we take it all the way to 100% clash detection, where we know that no two mechanical systems are clashing and that everything can be put together correctly. And frankly, I got a little long-winded there, but the bottom line is it's more work up front.
Mm-hmm.
And then the results are less change orders and less exposure to delays on those constructability issues that I talked about. And frankly, just to close on this topic, every developer wants to believe that the sooner they get a shovel in the ground, the sooner the project will finish. That's actually the kiss of death.
Yeah.
because when you start and you're not fully coordinated, you just leave yourself exposed to change orders and, delays because of coordination issues that often will cripple or bankrupt the project. And I've
Yeah,
lived through both.
the kind of thing you just explained when you're on the ninth floor and you realize you're no longer code compliant, and then you've got to do, RFIs and change orders, and then you're actually pulling out things that have already been built and trying to solve a problem that you could only see once it's actually built.
Exactly. So we have to have developers that understand this and have experienced that and have the patience to coordinate these BIM models correctly. And then when we say, hey, everything's coordinated, then you take because I just jumped around again, but to back it up, again, everything will go faster. And the real expense becomes the day you put the shovel in the ground. Sitting around a table with engineers and architects is less expensive than deploying workers out into the field. So, again, it's the Braveheart model of hold, and really
Right.
have that
Exactly.
patience to detail every aspect of the building, and know that you're going to have something that's fully constructible.
Yeah, look, and we'll get through all of this stuff, but there's another part of what you're doing, and I want to just on the software side, I like prospectively, I see this very clearly as the future. It's been slow to get out of the gate, and there's probably a whole bunch of reasons for why modular hasn't really taken off. But the other thing I understand about the software, and I just heard a management consultant at a ULI conference talk about this, and it was kind of like the first time I heard somebody talk about big data. I was like, wait, what is she talking about? But it seems like these systems can also become integration points for all of the different consultants, like in the same way that there's a Google spreadsheet that people can share and collaborate on real time. That these systems are allowing your MEP, your civil, your structural, your
That's
seismic.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
everyone's in a cloud and everyone's working. Okay, so if you want to just touch on that quickly,
yeah,
because that is really what's allowing this business to flourish, and that's why it's been a slow adoption, because you still had a lot of these coordination issues that we just talked about in modular, because BIM software has really begun to flourish over the last 10 years. And um, that what you just described is they change the names a lot. Autodesk needs to I know we talk about BIM, Revit, it's all in the same family. And then even now the cloud model of this is called BIM 360, or
right.
was. I think they may have just renamed it again. But to your point, yes, it's a collaboration where everyone's working in a virtual cloud of the building. And you're exactly right. Think about the old way of a 2D blueprint, right? Now, guys were hand drawing these buildings on vellum paper, and very little multiple discipline coordination. But what you had was you had a labor pool, or labor that knew how to build things. You know, in the technological, call it revolution, since the 90s, less and less kids went into the trades. So you lost these master craftsmen that knew how to do this stuff in the field, and they didn't necessarily need that BIM model as much, and they kind of had, costs were much lower, and people worked harder, or not harder, but I guess smarter, let's call it, in the construction industry.
They knew how to build.
Now they know how to build.
Yeah.
Now, that I feel like my generation, and we can touch on my history in construction at some point, but I feel like my generation was the last group of guys that really went into the trades heavy coming out of high school, let's call it.
Hmm.
And as that dying breed essentially, has evolved over the last 15 years, 20 years, there's just less and less qualified labor in, unions, and we can go off on that topic, you know, but union memberships are down. Even in the unions, I don't think you get the quality of and I was a union card holder in New York City. Um, but I don't think you're getting the kind of the benefits of paying for that union labor the way you used to. I think that has changed quite a bit as well over the last, 30 years, because again, it's just less and less people went into those trades. Um, and this is allowing us now to kind of do a lot of that coordination and take that, call it IP, that a lot of these builders had, and do it digitally. And that's also allowing some of the technology kids that have come up or wanted to participate in the construction industry, but now they can kind of still geek out on the digital side of things, and then see it get put together and put into a complete building. So I think, we're going to see this marriage of kind of technology and construction in the near future, and we're on the forefront of it.
That whole topic of, change orders, the example you gave is a perfectly good one, where you could see a bona fide issue show up. We're on the 9th floor. We don't have the clearances. We're no longer fire rated. Okay, let's huddle up and figure out how to solve this problem. But you could maybe go into your background of development on this question, but it seems that the savvy, shrewd, unscrupulous, whatever it is, general contractor, and I'm not meaning to typecast general contractors, they also have a really difficult job, can exploit the current contractual construct, if you will, and go, hey, your drawings aren't complete enough on this particular detail. And now we're in like RFI 469 and change order, God only knows what. And they're really manipulating, the developer who's put them to work.
Yeah,
but
I've lived through that.
Right. And it's
I have personal experience in that same exact situation.
Maybe sort of just drill into that as it pertains to the risk mitigation that, prospectively is what, why this is the future. So you don't have to deal with the sort of tri-party thing of architect, general contractor, and developer all pointing at each other as to why something's gone wrong.
Yeah. Well, I think that brings up a good topic, we don't need, conventional construction can still utilize that software the same way that we do. And I would advise anyone today, we know that data and technology is the future, right? So if technology is out there and your architectural team and consultant team is not utilizing the current technology for building buildings, you're falling behind, right? So whether you're building modular or conventional, you should be doing BIM LOD 350, level of detail 350 at a minimum, because again, it's a lot cheaper to figure out those constructability issues and code compliant issues that we talked about sitting around on a Zoom, frankly, everyone looking at that 3D model that we're talking about in a cloud than it is in the job site. And when you've got a bunch of contractors standing around that can't work, and in their defense, when these constructability code related challenges rear their heads on conventional construction projects because there was no BIM model, well, subcontractors are also trying to pay their bills. And if their guys show up at that job site and are standing around because no one can figure out how to do it code yet, I understand why that change order comes out, because these guys got to pay their mortgage and feed their family too. And, they're not bidding jobs to have their guys stand around.
That's right.
So again, it goes back to like the consultant team, and modular or not, utilizing this software and having the patience to coordinate it all prior to putting that shovel on the ground, I think is so imperative to the success of the project.
Yeah. So look, maybe you've touched a bit on your background. Maybe take us the journey, right? Like what brings, I'm sure there's some lyric about a long and winding road, right?
Sure. Yeah.
What sort of actually, you gave a little bit of the end of the journey, but what brings you all the way to here?
Yeah. I've been a lifer, let's call it. My dad was a New York City firefighter and a concrete contractor. My grandfather was a crane operator in New York City, worked on the original World Trade Center. My uncle was an iron worker. So I've been around the trades forever, right? Since basically I knew what work was. And then when I first got out of college, I actually worked mining water tunnels underneath New York City that were up to 7 miles long and 30 feet in diameter that had to be fully concreted on the interior. And this was to bring water from upstate New York to New York City. So I worked on some kind of engineering marvels, let's call it. And there's documentary shows about this. And that was the union card that I held for years out of college. And then I got into kind of hospitality development and was the partner who oversaw the design and the construction of about 30 restaurants here in San Diego. We did have an exit on that building. So I've always had this kind of hard work ethic and entrepreneurial spirit. We sold that company, that portfolio of restaurants in 2015. Then I was recruited to do the hospitality build outs in these hotels. And I was just supposed to oversee the food and beverage outlets operated by Tao Group. And essentially the hotels themselves had schedule overruns. And I frankly wanted to get back down to San Diego from Hollywood. I wanted to be, closer to the beach again. And I just said, hey, look, I'm going to help on the hotels. So I just jumped in the restaurant, and it was there where we had made some acquisitions in downtown Los Angeles that were single room occupancy, essentially homeless shelters.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when, I kind of went from being the food and beverage guy at the company and overseeing the Tao build outs in Hollywood to, hey, Damien's now running the hotel stuff. And then it was, hey, we made these acquisitions of 2 historic hotels in downtown Los Angeles. Unfortunately, the Morrison Hotel, great historic building, just had phenomenal bones, just burned down by homeless encampment and, guys breaking in and sleeping in there and started a fire and burned it to the ground. It was a complete shame, but we had obligations with those acquisitions to build 300 affordable housing units. And that was where I was tasked with, hey, Damien, figure out the fastest, cheapest way to build 300 apartments, permanent supportive housing units. And that was when I started studying modular. And with my lifetime experience in construction, I just said to myself, wow, this is going to be the future. I got to get into this. And I just poured in heavy. Again, like I said, the start was to maybe procure these modules overseas. And then when I started really drilling it down, I just said, I'd like to do this myself. And with their proximity to Mexico and some great real estate brokers, essentially, that we worked with in LA, Cushman Wakefield team, they connected us with Cushman down in Tijuana, and we found a great landlord, a built-to-suit lease. They built us a 210,000 square foot facility designed specifically for manufacturing these buildings.
And then the actual facility, I was reading on your website, is 29 workstations. Like, tell me how do you make the sausage?
So we got, we again, I touched on that we kind of treat it like automotive. So we even go way more steps than BIM in the coordination. Like the BIM coordination is the overall building and making sure all the plumbing and the electric and the routing of all that work. But we actually then take that BIM model and we break that down into every part number of the building. So you know how you get the IKEA kit and it says, oh, you're supposed to have 8 of these screws and 10 of these dowels and 5 of these panels and 10 of these, other items.
And
that's what we do.
Invariably short one or over on a few.
Yeah. But that's what we do. We basically break the entire building down into part numbers and pieces, and then we put it all back together again. And that's where we're similar to automotive, where those parts, it starts with the chassis. Like a car, you have the structural steel frame, and then you start putting the engine on, and then you connect the, exhaust to the engine. We treat it the same way. And just the way an assembly line for automotive manufacturing works, we do that for apartment buildings. And,
and what kind of capacity do you guys have? Like, is this, and how many, I guess, is this a 5-person operation and people are walking from stage to stage, or I'm sure
the workers don't move. So the workers stay put in their station, and they basically are putting together the widgets, which then moves over to the moving line, where the module itself moves on a rail system down the assembly line. So the workers are like waiting for that box and prepping all their material. And then every hour, let's call it, when the box moves, that worker jumps in, installs his part, and then the box moves to the next station. We have 2 full moving assembly lines, 29 workstations on each line. And it's very similar to conventional construction. It's just done in a completely different process. So the structural chassis, let's call it, comes into the production line from our welding station. The guys jump in and put all the plumbing that's underneath the floor. So, your toilet waste line, your shower drain line, then they pack all that with sound mitigating insulation. Then you put your 2-hour subfloor down, then you put your walls in. Again, the walls are kind of already have the electric and the back box for the outlets already screwed onto them. We make the walls separately in a separate workstation, and then it just goes down the factory floor step by step, drywall, taping, painting, and then installing the final finishes. And with that said, I've been approached by multiple material suppliers saying, hey, we've got this proprietary material that is better performance than the current stuff in the market. And my first question back is always, does it have the right code compliance listings, whether it's UL for electric or UPC for plumbing, and UL's not just electric, but fire codes. And if it does, I'll look at it. But if it doesn't, you can't use it, because the problem is, the minute you go to submit for the plan check and you have some proprietary material that doesn't have an ICC or equivalent listing on it, it gets stuck, right? So we don't try. We use the kind of typical materials, and people are talking about 3D printing buildings and doing all this stuff. Does it go there? Yeah, maybe. But until the building departments are willing to adopt these other technologies, let's call it, and or proprietary materials, because that's the thing, people that want it to be proprietary, well, you can't go get it anywhere else then, So like, if you go down, then I'm screwed. Again, it's that balance of pushing the technology or the material, I should say, and having the proper code compliances still, because we still have to deal with the governing agencies and the municipalities and the bureaucratic stuff that can be very challenging, and is really one of the reasons why construction costs are where they are. And, I think there are improvements to be made in all aspects of development, and, some of the stuff like that these municipalities ask for is just crazy. And the utility side of it is also equally as challenging. Like, we know the challenges Los Angeles had, with the fires, and we know, in San Diego, for example, if you're trying to build an apartment building, you have to apply for your power like 2 to 3 years prior to getting it.
Yeah.
So when you put that in perspective, like, even if the construction process speeds up to the point that we can get it to, where you could build an apartment building in 9 to 12 months, you have to be looking 3 years ahead that you're going to be doing a modular and start that application again, so you're not burning the cash when you finish your building and saying, wait, I can't get power. I can't turn on my elevator. I can't test my fire life safety system because I don't have permanent power yet. These are the other wrinkles that, frankly, developers have to deal with. And a lot of this is what's caused the housing crisis here in Southern California. And, that's coming back to it. That's really why I'm so passionate about what we're doing, because I do believe we can show the different municipalities and call it political side of this, that there is a way to scale this, but we need help everywhere. We need help on the plan check side of things. We need help on the power and infrastructure side of things. It's not just, oh, this developer's building 300 apartments, he's going to make all this money. The risk reward in development these days with interest rates where they are is very, very challenging. And you have to have a pretty good appetite for dealing with all the headaches that we just kind of touched on.
I think there's
really
another
keep
aspect
doing
of what you're talking about, and I know you have a hospitality background, so this will be familiar to you. But with the big brands, Hilton and Marriott, and sort of, I don't know if I'd go so far as to call them cookie cutter, but if you wanted to go build a courtyard in anywhere, central US, like there's a template and there's a, massive marketing machine that's going to get heads in beds, assuming you haven't put it in an oversaturated marketplace. And what you have found, at least at the margin, is people are getting into the hospitality business who don't necessarily know hospitality. And there's another part of what you're doing here that I think shouldn't be overlooked, which is, and I may be off here, so correct me if I'm off. I think you can take out enough of the complexity that the developer faces on the vertical build that at the margin, you're going to invite new industry participants.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great point, and I can kind of pivot off that in a couple ways. But one way that we're focused on, obviously, we touched a lot on multifamily and talked about doing 12-story buildings. And I've had everyone from different guys on my cap table to friends saying, hey, why don't you make ADUs? I really want an ADU. Can you do an ADU? And I was always hesitant to that because I'm like, do I really want to deal with, mom who wants her she shed and dad who wants his home office, and I want this and I want that, and selling to end users spooked me, frankly. And, it's a lot of work to just get one little order. We just talked about the size of my facility.
Yeah.
I could never make that pencil.
That's right.
And then all of a sudden, though, this tragedy happens in LA, and I lived through 9/11, which really isn't comparable to the fires, but, still a catastrophic incident that happened. And then we had Hurricane Sandy, more importantly, in where I grew up in Rockaway Beach in Queens. And my sister and my grandmother lost their homes. So in that storm. So, I kind of started looking at that saying, oh my goodness, 10,000 people are out of their homes. This is, terrible. And then I started looking and saying, hey, maybe we should do some ADUs because there's obviously going to be a huge demand and we can help people get back on their properties, and yeah, they might be in tight quarters, but, again, most of that was single family that burned. So you got a yard space, you can kind of, at least get back and out of a rental. Then we started looking at the properties and I'm like, wait a second, the Palisades, specifically Alphabet Streets, these are pretty standardized cookie cutter lots that are 5,500 to 6,500 square feet. Let's look a little bit closer at this. And what we've done now is we've developed a beautiful single family home that's about 8 modules. So 8 of our Lego blocks. And, with my experience in high-end hotel development, I've been tapping into the interior design firms or just my experience in that realm to say, hey, we can deliver a beautiful custom home that is just built in a factory, and we can do it in half the time, and we can save 30 to 40%. And, a lot of these people, again, I lived it during Hurricane Sandy. Your insurance isn't going to cover the full cost of a traditional rebuild. So now we're kind of bridging that gap where we can call it a custom home that is all steel. So it's got better fire resilience, better R values for insulation because of the way we build in the factory. And frankly, then we can save money and do it in half the time. So less than half the time, really, for single family. So, as we look at the different applications for this, again, to build a big factory like I have to sell a few houses a year doesn't make sense. But now we're looking at scaling this into the fire zones in Los Angeles. And frankly, there's been a ton of interest. There's a big appetite for it. And it's really the way that we could rebuild these communities. When you look at how long it would take and how many workers and how many trucks and how I've been through these areas multiple times now. It's unfathomable to think about trying to re-stick build all this, and the material shortages and the labor shortages and all the stuff we talked about for multifamily. Unfortunately, it's not, hey, this one guy on the street's remodeling his home. It's annoying that he's got 4 or 5 worker trucks in the, parked on the street here. And it's dangerous for my kid because he's popping out from behind these cars, and other neighbors are frustrated. So they're speeding around these double parked, worker trucks. I don't see a way to rebuild those zones without doing something or scaling.
Well, you're talking about
we're talking about.
Yeah, you're talking about like a suburban tract scale redevelopment that presumably is going to be done one by one with a bunch of bespoke executions. Well, no, I want this general contractor and I want this architect. And that just is, that's decades if you take that path.
Unfortunately, it's virtually impossible to do it that way. So we have to look at these different technologies and means and methods to scale this and do it quickly. And we're happy to help. So it's a feel good, it's a do good, and hopefully we can make some money in a successful company doing it, so that we can stay in business and help put a dent in the affordable housing that we know, the homeless crisis. And there's multiple, we're not going to get off topic on that. There's multiple reasons for that, but I think the issues have to be addressed with what we have with the homeless in downtown, and frankly, not just downtown, but all of San Diego. And we have the ability to put a big dent in that.
Yeah. So
because we can do it again for when you look at, sorry, I interrupted you, but when you look at the costs that are spent to build a permanent supportive housing unit,
it's absurd.
There's multiple layers of it, but it's the bureaucratic and the grant money and the time it takes to get the project approved and then funded, and then through grants, because it doesn't pencil with the rent that you get in one of these buildings. And I believe that if we fix the process, we can build. Well, I know hard cost wise, I can build these affordable housing units at half the cost.
Yeah,
and it's our taxpayer money.
That's right. That's right. I love that you brought this up. The affordable housing moniker is really misplaced because, for a developer or anybody on the finance side who understands costs, like you'll see these press releases where they'll be like, and we just built this new project in National City. I posted on LinkedIn about this maybe a year ago. And the cost per unit was like $900,000. And we were doing a market rate deal, less than 2 miles away for less than $400,000 a unit. And like, okay, so that's what we're calling affordable housing. We should just call it like government subsidized housing. And I don't blame the affordable housing developers. They understand their ecosystem and how to navigate and get deals done. But it's, this kind of a thing, let's just say it this way. There's better ways to skin that cat.
hmm Well, I can
for
give a
sure.
good example. Those 300 affordable housing units or the permanent supportive housing units, they were like studio apartments
Yep.
in Los Angeles. You're supposed to go to the top of the line at the building department, right? And you do for architectural and structural, but not for the fire department, not for low impact development, not for the, DW. Well, now they have, DWP focused on the affordable housing stuff. But when we were doing it, they weren't. And we gave up. We gave up as developers. We couldn't get the subsidies we needed. We were tied in with that Skid Row Housing Trust that eventually went under, which was a nonprofit. And frankly, though, just some of the nuances around like the building department approvals were really what killed the project, because when you get the grant money or the low income housing tax credit money, you need to be fully RTI and you have to put a shovel in the ground within, I think it's like 6 months of getting those funds.
Mm-hmm.
You really don't apply for those funds until you have your building permit ready to be issued. And we could
That's right.
never get it to that point. And we were
Yep.
trying to do 2 buildings that were 150 units each for homeless people to come
Yep.
off the street. And we still went through plan check for almost 2 years
Yep. Yep.
to
And the
build
affordable housing.
and the buildings were in Skid Row. They
Right.
weren't in Beverly Hills where like you got, all the neighbors saying, wait a second, the NIMBY's not in my backyard. I don't want that here. We were going into Skid Row. It was
Yeah.
insane. It was
Yeah.
just completely insane,
I want to ask a couple more questions on the build side, and then we'll switch to personal. I know you've got some time constraints this morning, but with all the detail you've already laid out, I'm really confident I know the answer, but I want to ask on behalf of any listeners, the end product quality versus site built. Is this a better product or is this a inferior product?
Well, it's far better. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you why. I mean, again, with the BIM modeling we do, and we won't start production until that's fully done, coordinated, and all the materials are tagged, because then one of the most challenging aspects to what I do is then we have to go buy everything. So when you have a general contractor, the general contractor is able to hire an electrician that knows right where to get his electric supplies. He has to hire the plumber, which is the same thing. Drywall guy, framing and drywall guy, same thing. Painters, same thing. We have to self-perform every trade in the factory. So I need, and if the material's not there as that box is moving down the line, well, then that box is stuck. And now I'm that subcontractor that has my workers standing on the factory floor, not being able to do their job, right? So I'm just burning man hours. So one of the most challenging aspects to what we do is the submittal, the approval of the material to the licensed consultant in the US, procuring that material and having it in the factory dovetailed together with the production schedule so that all the material's there and we don't run out of it. I mean, it's very challenging. There's been failures in the space, and this is one of the main reasons I would guess why. So with that, kind of said, all of that, right, has to happen. And then you get into saying, okay, now these processes are micromanaged, right? Every step of the way, where in conventional construction, your building inspector maybe comes once a week max, and he's got the next building he has to go to, and he has to drive in his car from building to building, where I have full-time QA/QC management team that we have 4 or 5 people that just walk from station to station and observe and have detailed checklists that those processes are being adhered to. And that if there is something defective, there's a sticker put right onto the work that is defective or not per the plan, that then there's a further investigation by by the rest of our architecture team or production team to effectively checks and balances every single step of the way, right? And again, we touched on change orders and some unscrupulous contractors, which I'm not saying there's a lot of great contractors out there, believe me.
Absolutely.
I have great relationships with plenty of subcontractors that are just great guys and want to see the projects be successful as well. Um, but sure enough, there are guys that do want to cut corners and save money and make their contract more profitable. And when that inspector's not there, are they going to cut that corner?
Uh-huh.
Or is
Yeah.
is their employee a little lazy and doesn't want to go get that extra piece of material and they're just going to splice something together and wing it?
Yep.
Yeah, probably going to happen. So, in our facility, that does not happen. No corners are cut and no stone is left unturned on the inspection process.
And another question that's just for the listener, because I think I got this answer too, but how does this thing not fall apart or rattle to pieces as you put it on a truck and bring it to a site?
Yeah, again, that's all the steel construction, right? We're designed to take a 7.0 earthquake in California. So each one of our individual boxes, and again, wood, when you ship those wood modules, a lot of times there's a lot of cracking and deflection of the structure itself, just because wood is flexible. We design each box essentially independently to be able to take that earthquake. So again, I don't think any of the roadways would mimic a
7.0 earthquake.
7.0 earthquake. So I think, that's the easy way to look at it logically, is just that. Like, everything's tons of welding in the facility, although on site we have no welding. Our system is designed with all bolted connections that are obviously all seismically approved as well. But that's something unique. The chassis is welded, but then when we put the life-size Legos or erector set together on site, it's all just bolted connections. So again, cost savings on certified welders and deputy inspections to make sure those welds are done correctly on site gets very costly. We intentionally designed our system to just have bolted connections.
I keep wanting to get personal on it, but there's one more question I got, which is, I know capital is not infinite, and yet, like, as I listen to your experience and the processes you've put in place, this is more an academic question because I understand capital constraints are real. Why wouldn't you be vertically integrated enough to control the site and then just start dropping, I'll just say model A, model B, model C. Oh, here's a 12,000 square foot site that we bought on a hard corner in this location. Here's another 12,000 square foot site on a different hard corner in that location. Here's a third hard corner. And you guys take it, I know the development side has got, yes.
Yeah. Well, that's where I'm going. It's
okay.
like, I'm very much a walk or crawl, walk, run type of guy. And, or, again, I think with our modular fabrication, now we're starting to implement facade systems, and different aspects to do more in the factory, right? To even cram down that timeline even more. With that said, I am a licensed general contractor in the state of California. I do, though, know my limits, right? I can't be in the factory and on the site at the same time. So I do try to, right now, get the factory side of it perfect, educate some GCs and some quality subs. Like I said, I've been in construction here in California for over 20 years. So I use those relationships to bring guys to the factory, to show them what they're going to get when they're on the site, to kind of cover that construction management side of things so we don't have scope gaps. Really, I bring general contractors and subs, and I use this to help benefit relationships or benefit developers to make sure we have a successful project from A to Z. But I really want guys that want to get into the space, that want to learn it, that don't say, I don't know what this is. I just want to price it the way I always price it. So I use my career relationships, let's call it, to bridge those gaps, to get groups that want to work with us. Ultimately, we will start doing turnkey solutions where we just handle everything from architecture and design all the way through the C of O. But for right now, it's about creating that bigger pie sooner. So I can't, do that for everyone everywhere without scaling. So it's kind of, let's do it with the strategics now. Let's start taking on, a couple projects a year where we do it turnkey while still using the strategics. Because you did ask, how big our facility is. At full capacity, we can put out about 3,600 modules a year, which would equal a couple thousand apartments, 1,500 to 2,000, because when you start playing Tetris with the Legos, sometimes it'll take 2 modules to make a 1 bedroom, and, studios can be done as a single unit, but it's essentially a game of Tetris we play, laying out our boxes on a site, like you said. And the idea is that, yes, once we get enough of a library of, let's call it, that virtual twin buildings, and those buildings fit on, a lot of even commercial lots are pretty typical in Southern California, across the whole country, really. You got your 7,000, 15,000, 20,000. And, the more that we can then have repeatability with not just the module itself, but the entire building. And we do have some developers that own multiple equal sized lots. And the idea is that we do copy and paste the building from lot to lot. However, still bring a different facade and a cladding system and potentially glazing so that we have this unique look and feel, and we're not sterilizing a neighborhood with 10 of the same exact buildings looking like a communist kind of
right
the
CCP,
projects, projects, exactly. And we have some of those in New York as well. The Mitchell-Lama housing that was built back in the 70s. But yeah, we don't want to do that. I do have high design experience. I've designed 3, 4-star, 4+ star hotels. So it's bridging that. It's bridging the cookie cutter. That's something else that I could touch on. We don't want our buildings to look modular at all. I know you talked about the quality of it, but we don't even want, from interior or exterior, we don't want anyone to be able to notice that it was modular.
Yeah. I think you mentioned yesterday you guys are just going to move away from that whole label, right? Modular.
Yeah, that's right. Because it's really not. It's just a different means and methods of delivering construction.
Yeah, it definitely seems like the future. Let's shift to the personal life. I know you've got time constraints and we could probably go for another hour, but mentors or other relationships you've had on your career journey, who might you have run into that's been highly influential, and any thoughts on like things you've learned along the way, or guys you might have a debt of gratitude to for kind of bringing you along?
Yeah. Well, going back, I've always been a self-starter, but certainly my work ethic, I think, comes from my dad, who he worked 2-3 jobs and just always was putting food on the table for the family. So I think I get my work ethic from him, and just growing up like that. And then ultimately then in my career, I had some great partners, James Brennan back when we were doing the hospitality stuff. And then when I went to LA, Grant King and Richard Heyman gave me the opportunity really to flourish in building high-rise buildings. So those guys were great. On the financial side, I have an uncle that was a senior VP at PNC Bank on the East Coast for his majority of his career. So he's really helped shepherd me through to the cash flows of operating these businesses, and just, kind of understanding the corporate finance side of things. And then more recently, since we started this business, my partner is Kevin Washington. His family are, I guess you would call them industrialists. They're big in all types of shipping and construction. But his dad, Dennis Washington, set up a phenomenal board structure. And I do have the ability now to tap into those guys for advice and kind of mentorship. And then there's the likes of developers like Dean Oliver from here in San Diego, and just those are the main guys that I really kind of have absorbed stuff from.
Pretty
over the
solid
years.
career. Did you say Grant Keane?
Yeah, Grant King. Yes.
Oh, King.
Yeah.
King. Okay. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I've
Mhm.
look, you've touched on it a little bit, but clearly you've got a lot of agency. And I heard your father was the concrete and firefighter guy, probably the other things. Your father was crane operator. You kind of went into the trades at least a bit in the early years, but certainly at some point you could have went into beverages or tech or a myriad of other things. What of all the things you do, like what keeps you in, or could do, I should say, what keeps you in commercial real estate?
Yeah, I love development. I love, going back to doing all those restaurants, the thrill of saying, "Hey, we have to open on this date and we're doing the grand opening party." And, that stress and that pressure, a lot of people don't like it. I kind of thrive on it. And then that feeling of kind of, I don't know the word I'm looking for, jubilation or just like the excitement leading up to that. And then the accomplishment of turning over that building, getting the C of O, just, it's what drives me. Right now I'm doing a 22 unit multifamily building myself, or as the developer, with our modular system in LA. And, it's really just that completion and the coordination and just the team effort and collaboration. Um, it's really fun. And that sense of accomplishment for me, when you complete these like big projects, has been what I think keeps me in the space.
Yeah, I've had a conversation with some good friends of mine about the gratitude you can have around being an entrepreneur, in that you get on the field and be in the game every day. That's what I'm hearing you say
Yeah.
in a
Yeah, I
different
love
way.
it. I mean, it's stressful. I've got a young family too. Got married a little bit when I was a little bit older, in my late 40s, and we chose to have 2 kids. Which
How
has
old are you?
been I got a 1-year-old and a soon to be 5-year-old this
You
summer.
and I have something in common. It's a little late start.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't trade it for the world though. I mean, it definitely, you know, stretches me a little thin sometimes. I don't get a lot of personal time anymore, but that's okay. I had a lot of that
Mhm.
with getting married late in life, so I got a lot out of my system. I think you know, up to my late 40s when I got married. So,
I tell people it's workout, work, hang with the kids for a little bit, sleep, repeat.
yeah.
Like, that's
Yeah.
literally it. There's not
Yeah,
much
my
else.
1-year-old hasn't really allowed me to get that
The
workout
sleep
in.
part
My
or the
kids are
workout.
under-risers. Yeah, I had to kind of sacrifice that, but I just, started to kind of get back on the exercise bike in the garage. Not even an extra 15 minutes to drive to a gym, but we'll get there. We'll get
Yep.
there.
What about any challenges? I'm sure on the journey you've had, you've been knocked down. How do you think about adversity and or failure, and how have you responded in tough times?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I've had this conversation with a few people. It's how you get back up, right? And I think we one of the most recent challenges we had was building 3 hotels, having COVID and cost overruns in the middle of, we were building 3 hotels during COVID. So you can imagine how, when you had some cost overruns and needed additional financing, uh, when the world was shut down and there was no one staying in hotels,
Right.
how challenging that could have been. So we got into some, let's call it loan to own kind of notes, and that presents some challenges to the financial viability of the developments. And um but that was all the money that was out there, right? There wasn't any other option. So those that hard work, and then all that feeling of accomplishment, obviously you hope that there's a financial reward at the end of that rainbow too. And sometimes those evaporate on you pretty quickly. So it's it's just never giving up and having that drive to just do it again and just not, as you said, I've experienced it, whether it was different hospitality venues that weren't quite as successful as we hoped, and you shuttered the doors and just move on. Hopefully, with being able to take some of those employees into the next operation, and really that's what I look to, is to try to keep my teams intact, and even if the daily team is not there, trying to stay in touch with people and still keep that network of people that are like-minded, and just have that drive to get up every day and just crush it.
hmm I mean, look, you sound curious. Like, I don't know how many people would start with, okay, I'm interested with about modular. I'm going to go fly to the Baltics and to China and other parts of the world and actually put boots on the ground and kind of do that level of diligence. And that, along with dealing with adversity, clearly are growth opportunities. What else might you do? I get it. When you have small kids, it's like, bro, one foot in front of the other. But what else might you do to keep learning and sharpening the saw?
Yeah, I think, I was more of the execution guy at the groups where I was at, where I didn't do as much of the financial side of the businesses. Obviously, we had reporting on these construction loans, and I had to kind of update the budgets and make sure that there was transparency and real-time reporting on those aspects, but not really the full, kind of piece of, that was it. I was like managing the construction and some of the soft cost budgets, but really just also now, I'm kind of unique where I know construction really well, or I consider myself an expert. I know development, entitlements, permitting really well. And then ultimately now the last piece is kind of gelling all this together with the money. So again, just the other headwind in modular is getting lenders comfortable with the factory and just this new means of construction, and educating them on that it's actually like less risk, right? As after what we talked about. But it's really that now is I'm moving more into the financial side of things and making sure that developers can get the construction loans approved that they need, or coming up with creative ways through lines of credit or letters of credit to get the project built for them, and then ultimately, have the construction lender take it out.
Yeah, it will take us 30 minutes if we start peeling that onion. So I'll leave that on the table. The whole chattel versus real estate financing and the complexities there. Message for either the seasoned entrepreneur who's at the top of the game, or maybe is getting their guts ripped out, or the college kid with a spark in his eye who might be a bartender downtown. Like, what sort of thoughts might you want to share with the entrepreneurs out there?
Yeah, on the seasoned entrepreneurs, I think, like, if we're going to stay on the modular topic, it's really if you have a development that you want to do, you kind of design with modular in mind from the beginning, and then it's easier to pivot to conventional construction if for whatever reason modular doesn't work, because modular is not great, or it's not perfect for every site, right? Whether it's a power line or it's a hillside, there's some things that just say, can't be modular. But really, seasoned entrepreneur, I mean, it's just pay attention to the money and the cash flow and the burn, because that's really, what causes most failures in the space. And always raise more than you think you're going to need. And also, manage every dollar like I do with my investor money. Like, we didn't come up with some private equity kind of fund money. It was a seed round of friends and family, that I treat that money like it's my own. You know what I mean? So watch every penny counts, make the sacrifices, don't overhire too early before before you don't need positions, wear multiple hats as the founder or, the principal there. You got to do multiple jobs. You got to be willing to put in the hours, and for the young guys, that's coming out of college, it's just attention to detail and follow up, right? Especially in development. The more you just pay attention, the more organized you are, the more checklists you have with detailed follow-ups. I'll give not shameless, but a plug to like the ClickUp software, and, Microsoft, I think, bought them now. And it's a lot of applying, AI and the organization that AI can certainly bring, to just have your detailed checklists. And it's that muscle memory of just wake up every morning, have your highest priority checklists in front of you, get those done, then move on to the next phase. And, I try to, on Sunday evenings after putting the kids down, still handwrite out my week and literally block out times where I'm going to focus on the most important things to the business, because as an entrepreneur, it's so easy to get sucked into minutia that isn't really that important. So if I take a goal for the week and I block out 3 different 2-hour blocks and just say, that's it, it's time to do that work, because if this doesn't get done, it's detrimental to the company. It's finding that time and having that, again, I think we all know time is the most important thing in life. It's the only thing you can't buy more of, essentially. So, you just have to manage it and treat it preciously, because, that without time management, you often just spin and focus on things that aren't that important.
I think it was Bill Walton, actually. Never confuse activity for achievement. Right. Like that message of being effective and being organized. I've had some experience with younger guys, and there's definitely a part of it, which is just learning how to work. Right.
Yeah.
What you're talking about.
Prioritize, right?
Yeah.
Prioritize, have that detailed checklist. Did I get this done today? Why not? What do I need to do to get that done? And trying to stay focused on that. Yeah.
On the topic of time, I am going to respect your calendar. Damien, thank you very much for taking the time. To the listeners, like the show, follow the show, do that stuff for us. It goes a long way. And Damien, microphone's yours for any closing statement, but thank you for the time. Much appreciated.
Yeah. Just closing statements. Let's bring more, affordable housing to help ease the rents in Southern California and give people a better quality of life. And, let's try to clean up the streets and get some of these homeless people the treatment they need to just have a better quality community throughout, Southern California.
Yeah. And make a place where our kids can actually buy a house.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, have a great weekend. Thank you, Damien.
Okay. You too.
Appreciate it.